6:20 a.m., Jakarta. Lion Air Flight 610 lifts off the runway. 189 people on board. A brand new Boeing 737 MAX 8. 2 minutes into the climb, something goes wrong. One sensor, one bad number, and the aeroplane starts pushing its own nose down. The pilots pull back. It happens again. 26 times in 10 minutes. A piece of software fights the crew for control of the aircraft. Neither pilot had ever heard of the system doing it. To understand why, we go back 3 years earlier. Boeing needed an answer to a new rival, the Airbus A320neo. The fastest way to compete wasn't a new aircraft, it was upgrading the one already flying, the 737, a design from the 1960s. Bigger, more efficient engines meant real fuel savings. But the 737 sat low to the ground. The new engines didn't fit the old way. So Boeing moved them forward and higher up the wing. That single change altered how the aircraft behaved in the air. At high angles, the new engine position pushed the nose up on its own. Regulators required predictable handling. This wasn't predictable. Boeing had 2 ways to fix it: redesign the airframe or fix it in software. Software was faster, cheaper, and it meant pilots already certified on the 737 wouldn't need new simulator training. That detail mattered enormously to Boeing's sales pitch. That software fix had a name: MCAS. MCAS stands for Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. A mouthful. Here's what it actually did. When the nose pitched too high, MCAS pushed it back down automatically. No pilot input required. On paper, a safety feature. But a safety feature is only as good as the data feeding it. Think of it like a smoke alarm wired to only one detector in the house. If that one detector breaks and screams fire, the sprinklers go off, even if there's no fire at all. And there's no way to stop them from firing again and again. That's what MCAS became. The original design was cautious. Let me explain it simply. It only switched on during one very specific, rare maneuver. The nose pitched up steeply, and the plane was pulling hard, like a sharp emergency evasive turn. Both things had to be happening at once. Boeing's own engineers calculated the odds of that occurring by mistake at roughly once every 223 trillion flight hours. Then, during testing, that changed. The system was expanded to switch on during completely ordinary flight too. Low speed, flaps up, nothing rare about it at all. A system built for a once-in-a-lifetime emergency was now running quietly in the background of almost every flight. And there's a second change, just as important. Remember that smoke alarm, wired to 2 detectors? MCAS was originally built the same way. It needed 2 sensors to agree before it would act. That requirement was quietly dropped too, down to 1 sensor, with nothing left to check it against. If that one sensor failed, MCAS would never know. A single angle of attack sensor, with no requirement to check itself against the other one on the aircraft. There was a warning meant to catch exactly this, an AOA disagree light, but a software bug tied it to an optional indicator package. Most airlines never had it working, including the one flying Flight 610. MCAS was never named in the pilot's manual. Not once. If it activated, the crew would have no idea what they were fighting. The Federal Aviation Administration certified the aircraft in March 2017. Much of that review was done by Boeing's own engineers, under a program that let manufacturers certify their own work. Nobody outside Boeing meaningfully reviewed MCAS's expanded design. Every piece was now in place. A system with too much authority, fed by one sensor, invisible to the people flying the plane. All it would take was one bad number. October 29th, 2018. 6 days before this flight, a different Lion Air crew flew this exact aircraft, and the exact same fault appeared. That crew recognized a runaway trim. They ran the checklist, cut power to the electric trim motor, and landed safely. Their save was never clearly logged for the next crew. The following morning, the aircraft flew again. Same faulty sensor, still installed. 2 minutes after takeoff, MCAS engaged. The stick shaker fired, warning the crew of an imminent stall that wasn't real. Airspeed and altitude readings disagreed between the two pilots' displays. Now there were 3 alarms competing for attention, not one. The pilots pulled the nose back up. MCAS pushed it back down. They pulled up again. It pushed down again. 20. Then 25. Then more than 26 times in just 10 minutes. The runway stabilizer checklist, the same one that saved the aircraft the day before, was never sustained by this crew. Under a wall of competing alarms, with no name for what was happening to them, there wasn't time. 13 minutes after takeoff, Lion Air Flight 610 struck the Java Sea. All 189 people on board were killed. Indonesia's investigators would later list 89 separate contributing findings. Their conclusion wasn't a single cause, it was a chain, where removing any one link might have been enough to prevent everything that followed. One of those links, Boeing already knew about. The bug suppressing the AOA disagree light had been identified before this flight. It was not fixed in time. 4 months later. A different airline, a different crew, the same aircraft type, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. Shortly after takeoff, the left AOA sensor tore away from reality. 74.5 degrees on one side, 15.3 on the other. This time, the crew ran the procedure correctly. Cut out the electric trim, exactly as trained, but MCAS had already driven the stabilizer hard nose down. And at high speed, the manual backup, a hand crank, was almost impossible to turn against the airflow. Briefly, the crew re-enabled electric trim to try to recover control. It let MCAS fire one more time. The aircraft entered a dive at nearly 600 miles an hour. All 157 people aboard were killed. Ethiopia's investigators placed the cause on MCAS itself. The NTSB formally disagreed with parts of that finding, arguing crew performance deserved more weight than the report gave it. Both things can be true: a dangerously designed system and a failure mode almost no crew could have recovered from once it began. Within 5 months, 2 crashes. 346 people dead. By March 18, 2019, every 737 MAX in the world was grounded. 387 aircraft. 59 airlines. Grounded for 20 months. MCAS was redesigned from the ground up. It would now compare both sensors, not one. Activate only once per event, not endlessly. And never exceed a force the pilot's control column alone could overpower. In January 2021, Boeing reached a deferred prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice. The charge? Conspiracy to defraud the FAA after Boeing's own test pilots were found to have withheld details about MCAS from the regulators evaluating it. 5 years later, a door panel would blow out mid-flight on a different 737 MAX. Different failure. Same question investigators keep returning to. Was the culture that built MCAS ever really fixed, or just patched? We've seen this shape of failure before on this channel. A system trusting a single source of truth with no way to check itself. Therac 25 trusted one flawed piece of logic to control a beam of radiation. MCAS trusted one sensor to control a wing. Neither disaster came from a single villain making a single bad decision. They came from systems where nobody was ever forced to ask, what happens when this one thing is wrong? That question is still the cheapest insurance engineering has, and it is still the one most often skipped.